I still remember the first time I played a Bethesda RPG, because not only did I discover a game that to this day is still one of my favorites of all time, but also a style of game that I just can't get enough of. Here's why. Thanks to Best Buy for sponsoring today's video. I was in high school, and one of my best friends at the time, still one of my best friends, Ed, handed me a copy of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind saying, "Hey, you've got to play this." And I remember thinking this was weird at the time because not only did he hand me the game to borrow and play and try out, but he also handed me a note with instructions of everything I should try to do within the first hour. Some of which was stuff to just advance the, basic plot of the game, and some of it was just fun little tips like where to find a magical sword early on that would help out a lot better than the basic stuff you could buy. And that was weird to me because at the time I was playing a lot of stuff that for the most part was fairly linear at the outset. There were games I played that had a bit of non-linearity to them, but at least for the first part of the game was usually pretty straightforward and you would know what to do right away. That wasn't really the case with Morrowind. To this day, the opening of that game is one of my favorite things ever because it is just so simple. A lot of the later games, which I still love, they tend to have a kind of very heavy sense of urgency with their early on quest. Something that you're supposed to take care of right away as soon as possible and get the main story going, which Morrowind doesn't really do. You basically get off of a boat, talk to a guy, and he says, "Hey, you're supposed to go report to this guy over in this city. You should look into how to get there and do that." And even if you focus on doing that as soon as possible, all that guy says for your first talk is, "Okay, you're brand new here, you need an identity, here's some money, go out and do some stuff, come back to me when you're ready to actually do something more." Which is genius. One of the most amazing things about a lot of the Bethesda formula style games is the freedom you have to play the kind of character you want to play, openly explore, and just kind of do things at your own pace. And while again, later games start to add maybe just a little more sense of urgency of where you should go, what you should do, this one really embraced the concept of, look, yeah, there's a main story, you can choose to engage with it or not, but really, here's all this big world for you to explore, mess with, and just kind of take in. And that was really something that I'd never experienced before. Given back in that time, not a lot of games were trying to be this ambitious with that concept of an open world. And it's a thing that we've seen caught on and show up in more and more genres and hybrids and different things like that. But this was really the first time that I firsthand got to experience that kind of feeling in a game, and it has stuck with me ever since, to the point where whenever people ask me about, a list of my favorite games of all time, look, I'm bad at favorites, I've said this before, and it's a thing that I constantly change depending on when and where you ask me, but one of the consistent top 5, if not really top 3 games I will always talk about is Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Everything they've released since then, I've been a really big fan of, at least when it comes to their single-player focused stuff. The other later Elder Scrolls games with Oblivion and obviously Skyrim, the one that really propelled them to a higher level of fame, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and while not actually made by Bethesda, Obsidian's spin-off work with Fallout New Vegas, which is really my favorite Fallout game. Time and time again, these titles have given an experience that, really I feel like a lot of other devs out there have tried to do their own spin on and their own approaches, but none of them have really quite done it the same way that Bethesda has. And look, I don't have any illusions about how the game has aged. Honestly, this is definitely one of those titles where I feel like, having grown up playing and experienced it, I give it a lot more leeway than someone that might approach it for the first time. But there is so much going on about this that to this day, I think has aged incredibly well. The only one that really, I think is an immediate eyesore for some people is the combat being the way that it is. But going past that kind of surface level of what the action of the game is and really focusing on just the overall structure, adventure, and journey of it. I mean, the size of the world you can explore, the amount of little hidden things there are to experience and see that don't really have any other purpose than to really immerse you further into this world. To the point where, look, I'm always, of course, going to try and keep my hype in check and pay attention to what we're seeing for upcoming games and, balance out that sort of anticipation with, a measured sense of wariness, but I can't help but be excited for whatever game they have next, Starfield being no exception. While I'm at it, one thing I want to shout out real quick, every game that I'm going to be talking about in this video is currently available on Game Pass. This is all stuff that you can jump into and play if you haven't done before. Obviously, some of these have been such big names, I'm sure you've given it a shot, but there's a lot of the older ones that I think still have a lot of merit if you haven't played that, and you should absolutely dive in. Which is also a great way to really quickly segue over to today's sponsor, Best Buy. Best Buy makes it super easy to grab all of your gaming needs with options like same-day pickup and next-day delivery across thousands of different items like the Xbox Series S. Offering the latest generation performance and game support, the Xbox Series S lets you play all the latest games, some being able to hit up to 120 frames per second, all having super fast loading times thanks to the use of an SSD, all at an affordable price point. But on top of that, being an all-digital system, it is the perfect companion with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, giving you access to a huge library of games that is constantly rotating, including the latest releases on the system, as well as beloved classics, including all the games I've been talking about in today's video, including Starfield once it comes out. Together, they make the perfect combo for you to dive headfirst into the latest generation of gaming. Make sure to check out the link down below in the description to learn more. So why am I ranting about a 20-year-old game when it comes to Starfield? Well, the thing about Starfield that to me is really significant is this is really the first totally new thing from Bethesda in this style. You know, Elder Scrolls has been around now to the point that we have 5 of them, not including an MMO spin-off and numerous other games they've done in the past. Fallout, while being something new for them back in the early mid-2000s, was a pre-established franchise made by another company at first that they kind of adapted into their own style, while Starfield is something completely brand new. Based on the gameplay we've seen so far, it absolutely has the kind of fingerprints of a Bethesda RPG on it, but in a setting and style of game that is completely new for them. You know, one of the things that was actually a little frustrating for me after their gameplay reveal at the last big Xbox conference was how many people were immediately making this association with No Man's Sky, which is something that I do completely understand. I see where that kind of initial correlation shows up, especially with the bits of gameplay that they showed. But knowing the history and playing the kind of games that Bethesda has made, you kind of immediately know the difference of how and why this is something that would be very different from a No Man's Sky is. Sure, it's in space, there's resource gathering, a large number of planets to explore, but with Bethesda, I'm expecting a certain kind of structure that's built a lot more on storytelling and building up the plot of your own character that isn't really a core aspect of No Man's Sky. Again, the Bethesda formula has absolutely gone through its changes over the last several years with new titles. Some for the better, some for the worse, and some just being appealing to different people for different reasons. I mean, there's absolutely been an overall shift towards streamlining a lot of gameplay aspects in order to focus on the kind of active action of what you're doing in the world. This is actually something that I've had debates with friends before about, you know, ranking the different Bethesda games and what I like about each one or why I like one more than the other. And you know, generally speaking, I think there's a lot of people who really like the later, more recent stuff where they discovered it with, say, Skyrim, and then other people like myself who discovered the earlier ones, and so a lot of them have the habit of ranking it almost from oldest to newest as their favorites. But really, me personally, you know, if we're looking at that kind of subsection of just Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, I actually rank it Morrowind, Skyrim, Oblivion. The reason being is that while I absolutely love the kind of game that Oblivion is, to me, it's always felt a little bit of a confused title where it wanted to be the kind of more streamlined gameplay experience that Skyrim offers, but didn't really know entirely where to trim down just yet. And so while there are holdovers about it from Morrowind that I really love, I think it just made for a slightly more uneven experience, where Skyrim is this trimmed down thing that, yeah, there is some stuff I miss from earlier games, but the resulting experience is one that is extremely comfortable and just fun to jump into. As much as I love Morrowind and it is still amongst my top 5 games of all time, I do find myself nowadays more often going to Skyrim every now and then when I want to replay one of them, because it's just such an easy thing to jump into right away and really focus on just the action and exploration. And that's the thing about updating a franchise formula over the course of several games, right? There's constantly testing and trying new things, and there might be new ideas that work out in one game and don't work out in another. And one of the things they've announced about Starfield that I'm actually really excited about, and this was after their big gameplay reveal, is the fact that you have a main character that doesn't have voiced lines. I know for some people this is something that immediately sounds like a what? Why would you cut that? Voicing is always such a cool thing to have. But honestly, for me, I think it's something that really detracted in Fallout 4, which was the one game where they added and tried this. The reason being is that, you know, with an open-ended game like this with so much content and so much to do, the more content the game has and the more choices you give the player, the more costly and difficult it is to have voice acting. So voice acting actually ends up being almost kind of a limiter to what you can do in terms of character personality and expression. And Bethesda announcing that they're removing that in favor of the more kind of classical approach of having a silent protagonist is really exciting to me, because it's showing that there is that kind of learning experience of trying stuff out in different games, and some of the stuff that may not have worked out for one reason or another, they're choosing to not lean fully into. You know, I think the biggest thing about my anticipation for Starfield and what I hope to experience from it is something that can't really be discovered or figured out until the game fully releases. And there's some really cool stuff they revealed, like being able to customize and build your own ship. But ultimately, these kind of snippets of gameplay and just seeing aspects here and there have never really been the thing that has sold me on a Bethesda game before. The thing that really sells it is really getting into the gameplay and world yourself and experiencing the kind of pacing and freedom that comes with that. Combat, graphics, customization, all that stuff is of course important and may be the thing that is the selling point for a lot of other people. But for me personally, the thing I'm really looking for is to just experience the game and see what kind of stories I can craft for myself and what things I can learn about the world it takes place in. That to me is really the important thing that makes a Bethesda game a Bethesda game. And while I don't know for sure if that's something Starfield is going to deliver on, I can't wait to find out when it launches next year. So that's my little rant about Bethesda games and Starfield. Look, Morrowind is such an important game to me, and Bethesda game franchises in general have always been some of my favorites, and I wanted to get some of those thoughts out about why I'm excited for Starfield. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button to let me know. Hit dislike if you didn't, it's good info for me to have. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Thanks again to Best Buy for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check out the link down below in my description, and I will see you guys later.